Have a seat. You've been talking recently about how we all talk in the world and in the press about this digital economy and how wonderful it is and how it's transitioning everything and changing and transforming. And you're not so sure. You're really worried about what gets called the digital economy these days. Why is that?
Well, I think the error that a lot of us are making is using digital technology or digital mechanisms to kind of amplify the business processes of the industrial age rather than invent business processes that are more consonant with a digital age. So in the simplest way, that might look like, oh, let's hire some kids to write some algorithms to extract value from the stock market, rather than looking at, well, what would a digital capitalization scheme look like?
Whose responsibility is it to redesign the market?
Yours, designers. I mean, that's really...
But it hasn't been traditionally, right? Nobody came to designers in this community that said, hey, we need to design a market for trading goods. Help us do that.
No, but it hasn't... Neither has it traditionally been the designer's job to figure out defensible outcomes for startups. Right? The designer's job was originally, I thought, to create the most user-friendly interface, the most usable object, the most, if we don't even have to say the most inspiring visual design, but the designer was responsible for the human being on that end of the business, and now the designer has been corralled in service of a business plan, which is not necessarily the best place for you guys.
So you're saying, if we care about the outcomes, if we care about the whole of what gets created, we need to insert ourselves in the process of things that we have never necessarily done before.
Or the things that you've always done. So if a designer was looking at the design of any kind of a peer-to-peer app, say, an Uber or an eBay or an Amazon, any kind of if a designer was involved in that, if you're going to be thinking of the short-term interests of the CEO and the venture capitalists who backed him, then you're going to say, okay, what we've got to do is develop the fattest platform monopoly we can, so we can extract the most value from these peer-to-peer interactions and achieve sort of market hegemony, and then be able to flip this business into something else and leverage it into other verticals and blah, 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 blah. If you're a designer, you're going to think, how can I create the thinnest application layer possible in order to extract the least amount of value from the transactions in order to promote peer-to-peer activity, whether it's transactional activity and the exchange of value, or social activity and the building of culture between these people. And those two things really seem at odds until you can convince the business that you're working for that, well, maybe take less money so you don't have to have a home run, and you don't have to make $1 billion, so you don't have to kill the actual business you were going to build in order to serve the business plan that you're now in service to.
So that sounds like a tall order. I want to just sort of poll the audience really quickly. How many of you out there feel like you're ready to do that? Okay, a few, right on. It's a tall order for people that may have a traditional design.
Well, you do it
background.
step by step, and it's also a tall order if you've been hired as a cog in a machine that's supposed to do this, and then the designer can't say, well, actually, I would rather design an app that works better rather than one that's going to build that other thing. The high leverage point for you guys is that you know how to design, and you don't actually need, in most cases, you don't need the $15 million of venture capital in order to make a better thing. Yeah. So you actually have a competitive advantage against the overfunded startups and the overfunded businesses, because if you don't take that kind of money, then you have the freedom to build a better app, which is actually at a competitive advantage in the overall marketplace.
Well, and the 2 days of this conference are designed to help you learn some new skills or point you in some new directions. Specifically, Bob and Lisa, who will talk after the first morning break, are all about designing new kinds of conversations, because they do enable new kinds of interactions. And so I think that a lot of the recent history of design in the last 20 years, for instance, is designers trying to figure out how to be ever more strategic in the kinds of engagements they've been asked to do. Because very often we get the design brief and it's the wrong brief. It's an app or it's a whatever, and it shouldn't be, and we know inherently it shouldn't be. But until we get into that strategic world where the decisions are made, it's always going to be the wrong creative brief. So what I hear you asking us to do is to start poking our nose in other people's business. And do you have any advice for how to do that gracefully and more successfully?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's just demonstrating the elegance and simplicity of certain kinds of solutions, which then makes it clear to the people you're reporting to that, oh, I get it. There's this extra part of the equation that we're being asked to insert into our business. So it helps them try to figure out how do they kind of deleverage, or how do they unwind from this kind of unnecessary big thing. I mean, the other thing is to appeal to their sense of wonder and excitement. I mean, anybody who knows someone who's gone into this startup world, you know that you've seen the moment where their heart breaks, right? You've seen where they say, oh my God, you mean the thing that I was dreaming I was going to do, I can't do that anymore, because that's only going to earn my venture capitalists 5 or 10 times on their money, and their model is that they need to make 100, so I've got to abandon that thing, right? It's at that moment that you have to say, no, look, you could still go build their thing, but now let's still build the thing that you wanted to do. In other words, that thing might end up being the thing they spin off or whatever. And then the other stage is when you're working for the giant companies. I mean, they know the great, dirty Deloitte secret of their business, which is that corporate profitability over net worth has been going down for 70 years. That their ability to make money with their money is diminishing, right? They're sitting on bags and bags of capital that they don't know how to deploy. And the only answer for them is to start, is to colonize, is to spin off other strange things. And sometimes they do them and they work, like Saturn worked, and then it's so threatening to the mother corporation that they get rid of it, or Song Airlines, or any of these interesting, Song Airlines was what? That was a design solution to the airline problem, right? It was saying, oh, look what JetBlue did, now we're going to kind of copy that and see if we can iterate further, but it made money, but it was too threatening to the mothership. But those are the kinds of threats that I think designers have to implement. It's getting often that skunkworks team or that little spin-off that lets you build something more operable.
It sounds to me that you're attributing a lot more agency to designers, ability to make decisions about their work and their careers than sometimes we feel we have, especially if we work in a large company maybe, or we feel beholden to take that job that we don't really like so much, but we need to, put food on the table. What can you tell us that sort of gives us the confidence to rise to the level of agency that you're essentially saying we already have?
I can't give you the confidence, because it may be a losing battle. It may genuinely be a losing battle, but if it's a losing battle, then I think it's a bigger loss than just the state of design in 21st century America. I think the loss is the loss of a workable, fun civilization and environment for human beings. That someone has to represent Team Human in a landscape that is utterly dedicated to a 13th century economic operating system. You know, the folks, nothing against Google, especially if they're a sponsor, but you know, the folks at Google are beyond techno-solutionists, right? They've brought in Ray Kurzweil. They are leaning into the singularity, right? With the hope that somehow human consciousness will be able to be uploaded onto a silicon wafer before computers utterly surpass us. And they don't see that as a bad outcome, right? This kind of apocalypse, end of humanity, where consciousness rises from the matter into the, you know, the moment of the eschaton or whatever's supposed to happen, that's seen as a good thing, right? And it's a good thing only if you really don't like humans, only if you kind of have a zombie apocalypse view of humanity where we are no better than these flesh-eating dead things. And you believe that the real role of human beings will be to service the machines once they surpass us. Right? That's the sort of the modern, you know, their religion really is, you know, stated by James Glick in The Information, is that the history of the universe is information striving towards greater states of complexity. And human beings were the most complex processors for a while, and now computers are going to be the most complex processors, so we should serve them and watch information continue on its evolutionary journey without us. And we're important only insofar as we can keep the machines running. And that's not an outcome that I like. And that outcome is just dovetails so efficiently with old school corporate capitalism, right? Which is just a pedal to the metal, let her rip, let the system matters more than the human beings in it. So design is a war with two fronts, right? On the one hand is your task is to make designs that actually serve humanity and do all that. On the other hand, you have to design ways of selling those solutions to the people you work for. You know, and who else is sort of my question. It's I don't have the creative solutions for each of you in each situation, but I do know that you're the last gasp. The last gasp of humanity are the people who understand the quirky strangeness, the creative weirdness, the people who are involved in the nooks and crannies of reality, the people who show their calves at 9 in the morning. You know, the designers are the last geeks because the geeks are business people, right? We are it. This is we are the last nerds, you know, and we have to embrace that and use that and get people proud of that.
I'm really glad to hear you say we, because you just put yourself in the boat with us as designers, and I think that you have a very designerly approach to the writing and the critique that you share with the world.
Oh yeah, my first book was called Siberia. It was written like 1991. It was canceled in 92 because Bantam thought that the internet would be over by the time the book came out. But what I said in Siberia was that we were on the brink of a designer reality. That's what I called it. Nice. That this is a designer reality, a reality that you basically hallucinate into existence. You know, and that's why they were hiring all the psychedelic people to work in the computer companies in the early days. They were the only ones who felt comfortable with a reality that, you know, if they dreamed it, it would be there. And designers are the only people who really do that by trade. You know, who do that not just professionally, but, you know, as their, you know, that's what they're born to do. And that's what we're looking for. That's what Buckminster Fuller was talking about way back when, was we need design solutions. These are not problems inherent to reality.
I think that designers, certainly in my experience, are really comfortable with the kind of humanism that you're talking about. We live it. We grope around trying to describe how important it is to our clients and our peers. We see it in this community all the time. Last year's conference was head, heart, and hand. It wasn't, software, hardware, and operating system. And even when we know the value of tools, we know the value of technology that enables us to expand what we can do, but it's never the focus for this community. It's always this humanism. Who can we align ourselves? You said we're the last gasp, the last hope for humanity. It's like the beginning of a science fiction TV series. Who else can we align ourselves with?
Luckily, with the 99.9% of people who are out there are your natural allies. I mean, the easiest way to say that would be the consumers and producers of our world. People, and this is the easy way to sell these things to your bosses if you have them, is people are friggin' paranoid at this point between the NSA and Facebook and Google and everybody else and every device that has been, designed. They don't even use the word sticky anymore, but these are the stickiest tools, known to man. People experience it that way, and they are aching for, they really are, consciously aching towards something that doesn't quite feel like it's vacuuming as much out of their soul every time they use it. That's why they'll even look at the kids do something like, what is it called, the Hello thing, the alternate, and that's not even well designed, and people are like, ooh, this is great design, right? What they mean by great design is that it's not asking stuff of them, and when people go towards tools that aren't asking things of them, there's that natural, there's a natural pull. I do believe we've reached the place where people are saying, I don't like my phone, I want to put it down. Half of them are, they're running and buying the iPhone 6, and the other half are saying, why do I have to buy the iPhone 6, and why is my iPhone 5 suddenly not working with the release of the iPhone 6? Why is the screen doesn't turn now, and the things I'm touching aren't, what? We know. So if everybody knows, then they are your allies, in the biggest sense. In the smaller sense, your allies are communities. Any locally grounded community, that could be as big as New York or as small as, whatever, Ithaca. Any people who are in a physical community are working against corporatism, which is designed to delocalize people. So, people who are trying to be local, people who are trying to create time in their lives. That's a big one, because every device, every business plan is really looking at human time as the commodity. That's the only one we have left. So if you give people back their time, then you're their friends. The entire dying municipal sector are your friends. They're in an odd way. This is as much decline as can happen. Then that can come up. Small business are your friends.
And they need allies.
Yeah. They're your natural allies, because they are looking for, that's what people need now, is ways to transact and exchange value. But this is the same thing that happened way back in the late Middle Ages. It's why people invented local and market-based currencies. It's because there wasn't enough, dinars or whatever, little gold coins for them to transact. They had bread, they had shoes, they had wine, they had all the stuff. Right, but they didn't have a means of exchange anymore. So they invented their currencies, and those were made illegal. Well, we're back in a similar situation where we have all the economic players required for great wealth, but we don't have a means of exchange. And that's because so much money has gotten trapped in, and it's even trapped for them, but it's trapped in accounts, in sort of dead, abstracted, monetary instruments. So you have allies in the people with all that trapped value. Trying to help figure out ways for them to be able to exchange value with each other is a biggie.
I would also argue that we have the opportunity because, one of my favorite quotes from the sustainability world, another natural ally for us, and things like the sharing economy. We see evidence of this experimentation and evolution of new models. One of my favorite quotes from the sustainability world is a quote by Adam Kahane, who's actually quoting a friend of his. And it says you can't be part of the solution unless you're part of the problem. I thought it was so great that I named I titled one of my books, Design is the Problem, because if you're not there where the bad decisions are being made, you're not anywhere where you can affect better decisions being made. You're on the street corner with a picket sign outside the system. And designers are in the system. We're there. And that's, every day we have the opportunity to help evolve things and make better decisions for our clients and for our peers, et cetera. But we have to take that initiative. We have to have the confidence to say, no, I'm going to argue for this. I'm going to say right now, this is the wrong thing. You made the wrong decision, we need to make something else. Or it's not good enough, it can't ship. It's going to fall flat, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, and designers can turn companies. I mean, first, especially in the digitally world, designers are still few and far between. I mean, I've seen the way companies, search desperately for, and this is not just someone who does, little logo pictures. I mean, real, not an illustrator, but designers. They're hard to find, and when they are found, they can. I mean, this is on your hiring, in your interviews, you have to explain what design is and how design is part of the process of figuring out how this company works and being at the right meetings rather than at just the wrong ones, in order to show that, well, if you want this design to actually work, then the layer beneath this design has to work like this, and the layer beneath that has to work like that. Otherwise, do you see why the design is bad? Now, we can kludge that to try to cover up your faulty system, or we can actually make a good, transparent design if we fix this.
Do you see businesses being open to the conversation of, what I interpret is you're saying that a lot of businesses, a lot of industries are sort of terrified that their models are breaking and falling apart. And does that open up the opportunity for them to be more receptive to talking about design in a new way?
It does. I mean, the thing is maybe 50-50. Half of businesses understand that that's happening. So what they're doing is the same extractive robber baron thing to their own business that their business has been doing to its marketplace. So the CEO will time out, well, I think I can make 3/4 work. And then they'll retrofit their plan to the 3/4 left that they have, with them leaving at the end of those 3/4. So, okay, my option's here, my this there, and they'll maximize it and they'll just drive the company down. So one strategy for when you see the plane crashing is take all the stuff off the plane and then jump out right before it hits. So a lot of them are doing that. The other half are looking, and that's why you're right, the sustainability community is a natural ally, both in reality and in worldview. The other group will say, all right, how do we redirect this company towards a sustainable outcome, right? And that usually means, spending down their capital. If they've got shareholders, it means communicating with them that your share price is not going to grow. We're going to pay you in dividends. We're going to pay you in this. We're going to do all these other things. But this is not a growing company at this point. This is a company that's moving towards a state of sustainable equilibrium. And if you want to get off the train, then do. And it's tricky. Some companies, when they say that, shareholders get so upset that the company then has to go private. That's what Dell did, and Heinz, and a bunch of companies. They run to the private equity, which sometimes is patient, sometimes is just more evil than the shareholders were to begin with. But there are companies, I would argue it's about half of them, of the ones that know what's going on, that are willing to start to look for ways to shift, and they are ripe for design solutions.
This is a great conversation because it previews everything you're going to get over the next 2 days. Later on today, when Suze comes out to talk about redesigning corporate forms to enable some of this, this is why. Tomorrow, when we have economists coming and talking about how do we redesign the market, how can we redesign the economy, this is why. We have to get involved with the operating system, as you describe it, in order to enable the kind of world we want. One of the frustrations I have, I teach at a school that's every person that teaches at school knows this is coming. The education model's broken. It's failing, and it's kind of failing fast, whether that's because of the price of education or technology disrupting it. And one of the frustrations I have at my school, but I'm sure all of you do as well, is there's no office of design the next model. There's no person whose responsibility is figure out where we need to go next. That's a design opportunity. But also at a societal level, there's no office of design the next successful model for the world, for the society, whether it's the economy, whether it's social issues, et cetera.
Well, unless you're in China or something, there's some office.
Right, all right. Or but, Singapore.
Yeah, but it's just not the way it's done.
Well, so what's the way that we need to do it?
It's everybody does it at the same time in different ways, and we share models and stuff. I mean, I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I don't think education's that broken. You know, it's you get kids in a room together with a teacher who cares about them, and for the kids, most teachers, you make sure the teacher knows it. Do they know how to read? Do they know how to do math? Can they do long division? Do they have a way of explaining it? I mean, that's not rocket science. And the people who are learning rocket science, well, you put them in a room with a rocket scientist and then let them kibitz. You know, what we're doing. I feel like in education we're undervaluing the bandwidth of face-to-face experience. You know, dating back to Socrates and Plato, the most dangerous thing is a handful of people sitting in a room conspiring. Right? When conspire literally means to breathe together. You know, when you're breathing together, and that's when the ideas get hatched. So I don't feel like, I mean, education might be, you know, financially broken, but that's because capitalism is financially broken. You know, go to France and you can get a PhD for free, for God's sake. And they have less unemployment than we do.
And they jail fewer citizens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of odd. I mean, they don't have quite the same background we do either. I mean,
they have better cheese, though.
Better cheese. And better cheese. It's not though. It's a plus.
Well, so I hear what you're saying.
I don't see it as, I just don't see it, you know, that as broken. You know, the redesign of reality happens, you know, one redesigner at a time. You know, and that's the big plus of living in a distributed age, right? Is that, and it's not individual so much. It's not my reality and your reality and his reality, but it's this weird, we used to call it, William Gibson, the consensual hallucination, right? Now we're going to start dreaming and building this thing, you know, together in our groups. The amount of agency that individuals have is actually increased. You know, if they take their face off their iPhone for a minute, you know, the amount of agency that a conscious human being has today is greater.
Sure.
Is greater than ever. And you're going to have some people building their little Burning Man society and others building their little Etsy society and other people going into, you know, algorithmic trading. Everyone's going to, everyone I think gets to do their thing. You know, I think we fall into a kind of a monocultural trap if any one of us thinks we have the answer for more than our little clan, you know, our little strange strip. And it's that sort of, you know, diversity of design approaches that leads to that
resilience.
Yeah, resilience and that messy fertility that humans thrive in.
You were earlier. You were sort of railing against the industrial age and the models from the industrial age. When I talked about the breakdown of the educational model, it's because so much of education has this industrial model of professor talking, passive students listening, and that's what's completely changing.
Yeah, but that's you know, so look at the Harkness method of education. Look at any you know, genuinely progressive constructivist education style. I mean, you come into my classroom, we're going to yours.
Yeah.
I guarantee
Absolutely.
You're not standing in front of these kids going, and the next thing you have to know and take a test tomorrow. I mean, no, that was...
No, because they're like this, and they're not listening.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Oh my God. That's the Prussian, but that was the Prussian model
Yeah.
on which America was built. You know, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and all those guys, they paid for American schools to create the workers for the factories that they were building. So they put bells in the classrooms. The teacher was like the foreman, and that was the way our school system was designed. But once you have a person either with knowledge or with the ability to construct meaning out of knowledge in a room with people who are learning to do that, that's all you need for education. Yes, it shifts. So the authority of the educator shifts from being a person who has exclusive access to information to now being a person who just has more experience drawing the patterns out of the data. So that's what you end up imparting, is that kind of skills of pattern recognition and drawing connections between things, rather than you don't get their attention because you've got the secret.
Yeah. I'm sorry that we're out of time, because I could listen to you all day, to tell you the truth. But come find him at break and talk his ear off, and
or you can find me,
continue the
Rushkoff at
conversation.
rushkoff.com. Just email.
Great.
And I'll find you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Douglas.